Caitlin Clark out for the remainder of the 2025 season, something we all think we knew was coming after what Stephanie White said earlier today. We couldn't be too sure until we see it for ourselves. And with this announcement from the GOAT's mouth herself, Caitlin Clark won't be returning this season, nor if the Indiana Fever make the playoffs.
The news that shook the entire basketball world dropped like a thunderclap. Caitlin Clark, the face of the WNBA, the player single-handedly credited with saving attendance records and television ratings, has confirmed she is leaving the league.
Caitlin Clark officially done for the 2025 WNBA season, as she and the Fever announced on social media.
Not for retirement, not for a break, but for Europe, a move that threatens to rip open the fragile fabric of women's basketball in America. This isn't just about a player making a career move. This is about the league's credibility, its survival, and its ability to hold on to the very superstar it built its future upon. Clark's exit isn't simply a headline, it's an earthquake, one that's already sending shockwaves through fans, players, and league executives alike. To understand the magnitude of this announcement, you need to first remember what Caitlin Clark represented. She wasn't just another rookie, she was the rookie. The player who stepped into the WNBA and instantly turned a league with stagnant ratings into must-see television. From the very moment she debuted, arenas that once struggled to half-fill their seats suddenly overflowed with screaming fans. Scalpers circled outside like it was an NBA playoff game. Clark wasn't just a star, she was a phenomenon, the kind of once-in-a-generation athlete that could redefine an entire sport. For the WNBA, her presence was more than basketball. She was the marketing strategy, the sponsorship pitch.
KTV was ready to watch Caitlin Clark get busy this year, and now it's over already. We got 13 games of Caitlin Clark. This season has been a complete train wreck.
And so, as the dust settles, one thing remains clear. The WNBA will never be the same. The league that once pinned its hopes on a single player now must reckon with its own failures. And Caitlin Clark, whether you see her as a betrayer or a trailblazer, has ensured her name will echo not just in basketball history, but in the history of women's sports. The final irony? By leaving, she may have done more to force change in the WNBA than she ever could have accomplished by staying. So, what do you think? Is Caitlin Clark abandoning the league that made her a superstar? Or is she simply making the smartest, boldest move of her career? Drop your thoughts below, because one thing is certain. The debate over this decision is only just beginning.
Have enough time. Let's see. You mentioned Chloe not having enough time. Does Caitlin now have enough time?
Yeah, we really want to use this West Coast trip to evaluate. We're going to sit down after practice today and hopefully have a direction soon.
For months, whispers had circulated that European clubs were making offers, multi-million-dollar contracts, lavish perks, promises of better training facilities, better medical care, even private security to ensure she was protected both on and off the court. These weren't just rumors whispered in dark corners of basketball Twitter. These were serious negotiations, backed by billionaire ownership groups eager to cash in on the global appeal of Clark's name. And while the WNBA tightened its purse strings and brushed off concerns about players' safety, Europe was quietly setting the table for her arrival. A royal banquet for the queen of the game.
The irony here is brutal. Caitlin Clark was supposed to be the WNBA's savior. She brought in the crowds, she sold the jerseys, she lit up ESPN highlight reels, and she carried the entire weight of the league's visibility on her back. Yet it is precisely that back that absorbed relentless punishment from defenders who treated her like a target. Game after game, she was shoved, hacked, tripped, and elbowed, with referees often swallowing their whistles. Fans demanded answers. Why wasn't the league protecting its most valuable player? Why were hard fouls and borderline assaults brushed off as tough defense? For months, the narrative grew louder. Clark was being treated differently, not with respect, but with hostility. And now we have the answer. She's done tolerating it.
For the season. Officially done for the season. This is not ideal. This is not ideal at all. This is not something that I think anyone wants to have to deal with.
When the announcement dropped, fan reactions were immediate and polarized. Some expressed heartbreak, tears, tweets filled with phrases like, "I can't believe it," and "the league is finished." Others raged, accusing Clark of abandoning the league that gave her her platform. Hashtags like WNBA exit trended alongside hashtag protect Clark. Some mocked the league itself, pointing out that this was bound to happen the moment executives underestimated her value. One viral post summed it up perfectly. The WNBA didn't lose a player, they lost the player. To put this in perspective, think about the numbers. WNBA attendance during Clark's rookie year surged by over 40% when she played. Television ratings for her games didn't just rise, they shattered previous records, drawing audiences that rivaled NBA broadcasts. Merchandise sales? Off the charts. Clark's jersey became one of the top-selling items in all of sports, not just women's basketball. And yet, despite all of that, her base salary was capped by league rules at less than a fraction of what her male counterparts earn overseas. For comparison, a European club's opening offer reportedly exceeded $3 million per year, not including endorsements, housing, travel luxuries, and full medical coverage. In the WNBA, the maximum base salary couldn't even scratch 1/10 of that figure. So when critics call her move betrayal, when they sneer that she owes the WNBA her loyalty, one has to ask, loyalty to what? Loyalty to a league that failed to ensure her safety? Loyalty to a paycheck that looks microscopic next to global offers? Loyalty to an institution that marketed her face but couldn't guarantee her respect on the court? Clark's decision may sting, but it isn't betrayal. It's survival. It's strategy. It's a young superstar realizing her window of dominance is now and refusing to waste it under the conditions she was forced to endure. Still, the backlash is fierce. Sports talk shows are already divided. Some analysts argue that Clark's move will devastate the WNBA's already fragile credibility. They claim fans who discovered the league through her will vanish, and sponsors will reconsider their investments. Others defend her, saying no player should sacrifice their health and financial future for the sake of a league unwilling to evolve. The discourse mirrors the fractures within the fan base. Some are angry, some are empathetic, but all are shaken.
The timing of her exit couldn't be more dramatic. Just when the WNBA appeared to finally break into mainstream relevance, Clark's departure could drag it back into the shadows. It's as if the league was standing on the cusp of a breakthrough and then stumbled headfirst into a chasm. And the damage may extend beyond Clark alone. What message does this send to future stars? If the brightest of them all chose to walk away, what incentive remains for others to stay? Angel Reese, Aaliyah Boston, Paige Buchers, all names that could define the next era, will now watch carefully to see how the league handles this fallout. There's also the cultural element. Clark isn't just a player, she's a symbol. She represents visibility, momentum, and hope for women's sports. Her games were family events, where young girls wore her jersey and saw possibility in her every three-pointer. Now those same fans will be asked to tune into overseas streams at odd hours if they want to follow her career. The WNBA loses not just a star, but the bridge it was building to mainstream America.
The league's executives, of course, are scrambling. In statements, they've expressed disappointment, but also insisted the WNBA remains strong, that no single player defines its future. Yet the hypocrisy of that statement is glaring. For months, they basked in Clark's spotlight, plastering her on every marketing campaign, selling her story as the league's story. Now that she's gone, they retreat to corporate language, pretending her absence is a footnote instead of the headline it truly is. Meanwhile, in Europe, celebrations are already underway. Clubs in Spain, Italy, and Turkey have been competing for her signature, and whichever team secures her will instantly elevate their league's profile. European basketball has long been seen as a refuge for WNBA players chasing higher paychecks, but never has it snagged the star of Clark's magnitude so early in her career. This isn't a twilight move for a veteran. This is a 23-year-old superstar in her prime choosing Europe over America. That precedent alone is groundbreaking and potentially devastating for the WNBA.
Think about the domino effect. If Clark thrives overseas, and she likely will, it opens the door for others. Suddenly, Europe is no longer the off-season option, but the main stage. Younger players may start plotting similar moves, forcing the WNBA into an existential crisis. Can it afford to lose its stars to foreign leagues? Can it compete financially? Can it even ensure basic protections that players demand? These are no longer hypothetical questions. They're here, staring the league in the face. And then there's the twist of irony. Clark, the very reason WNBA arenas filled and TV networks invested, may now become the reason sponsors hesitate. If the brightest star bolts after just one chapter, what confidence should advertisers or broadcasters have in the league's future?
It's not just about Clark leaving, it's about what her departure represents: instability, vulnerability, and a failure to adapt. The story of Clark's exit also taps into a broader narrative about women's sports and labor rights. For years, female athletes have raised concerns about pay disparities, about safety, about the lack of investment compared to men's leagues. Clark's move isn't happening in a vacuum. It's the natural consequence of a system that refuses to change fast enough. It's a wake-up call, and the fact that it had to come from the WNBA's crown jewel makes it all the more damning.
As we dissect this decision, it's important to remember that Clark is still just a person, a young woman navigating immense pressure. Critics frame her as ruthless, opportunistic, but consider her reality. Every game she played came with the risk of injury from defenders who targeted her, fouls that went unchecked. Every press conference featured questions about whether she could carry the league. Every endorsement deal used her face to sell tickets, jerseys, and broadcast packages. And yet, her paycheck didn't reflect her worth, her safety wasn't prioritized, and her voice often felt drowned out. When she finally chose herself, why should anyone be surprised? In fact, the real surprise may be that it took this long. Many players before her hinted at the allure of Europe, but stayed out of loyalty or lack of leverage. Clark had leverage, and she used it. That in itself is historic. A woman athlete recognizing her value and refusing to settle for less. Of course, not everyone sees it that way. Already, pundits are lining up to paint her as selfish, as abandoning her teammates, as undermining women's basketball in America. But these arguments overlook the fundamental truth. One league's survival cannot rest on the sacrifice of a single individual. The WNBA's inability to retain Clark is not Clark's failure, it's the league's.
The Indiana Fever star Caitlin Clark has been ruled out for the remainder of the 2025 season due to injuries, she announced on social media Thursday. Clark, the 2024 number 1 pick, had been limited to 13 games this season, hadn't appeared since July 15th.
And so, here we are, at a crossroads. Caitlin Clark confirmed what many feared but few believed would actually happen. She's leaving. The WNBA faces an uncertain future. Fans are left divided, some devastated, others applauding her courage. And across the Atlantic, European basketball prepares to welcome its new queen. The fallout from Caitlin Clark's announcement is only beginning, but its ripple effects are already impossible to ignore. Sports fans are not just reacting to the loss of a star, they're questioning the very stability of the WNBA itself. And that, perhaps, is the most damaging consequence of this saga. For years, critics of the league have argued that it was one injury, one controversy, one misstep away from collapsing under its own weight. Supporters, on the other hand, believe that the infusion of talent from players like Clark, Angel Reese, and Aaliyah Boston marked the beginning of a new golden era. Both sides now point to this decision as evidence of their arguments. For the critics, Clark's exit proves the league cannot retain its brightest lights. For the supporters, it highlights how desperately reform is needed if the WNBA wants to survive the next decade. Let's not forget how we got here. Clark's rise wasn't a slow burn. It was a meteoric explosion. Her college performances at Iowa drew massive audiences, often rivaling men's tournament games. She was, by all accounts, a generational scorer, with charisma and confidence to match. When she entered the WNBA, the league marketed her as the chosen one, the player who could finally drag women's basketball into mainstream recognition. That pressure is unimaginable. It's the weight of a sport's entire future being placed on one athlete's shoulders. And yet, she delivered. From her very first professional games, Clark shattered expectations. Fans who had never watched a WNBA game suddenly tuned in. Casual observers became die-hard supporters. Even media outlets that had previously ignored women's basketball scrambled to cover her every move. But here's the tragic irony. While Clark gave everything to the WNBA gave little in return.
She got a bunch of messages of support, but this is a big one. LeBron James, minor setback for a major comeback. Rest up, get healthy, and be you.
This wasn't just about money, though money played a massive role. It was about treatment, about respect, about safety. Clark became a lightning rod for physical aggression on the court. Defenders didn't just play her hard, they played her dirty. Game after game, she was hammered by fouls that went unchecked. shoved into the floor, elbowed in the face, targeted in ways that went beyond competitive spirit and bordered on malicious intent. Fans noticed, analysts noticed, even former players called it out. But the league's response was muted, defensive, and dismissive. And now the price of that negligence is clear. They lost her. When Clark weighed her options, the decision wasn't complicated. On one hand, a league that capped her salary, failed to protect her physically, and leaned on her fame without investing in her well-being. On the other, European clubs offering millions of dollars, world-class facilities, and a level of respect she hadn't consistently felt at home. It's not just that Europe gave her more, it's that Europe gave her what she deserved. Critics who accuse Clark of being ungrateful forget that her very presence poured millions into the WNBA's ecosystem. Ticket sales, sponsorship deals, television rights, all skyrocketed because of her. And yet, she remained trapped under a collective bargaining agreement that kept her pay low. Is it truly selfish to demand that her compensation reflect her value? Or is it selfish of the league to milk her name while refusing to give her what she earned? Fans across social media have been split into camps, and their posts reflect the cultural divide. One viral comment read, "If the WNBA can't keep Caitlin Clark, it doesn't deserve Caitlin Clark." Another countered with, "She built her platform here. Walking away now feels like abandonment." These aren't just casual opinions. They're deep reflections of what people believe loyalty and progress should mean in sports.
The real question, though, isn't whether Clark made the right decision, it's whether the WNBA can survive her departure. That may sound dramatic, but let's face it, perception matters as much as reality. Sponsors invest in the image of stability. Fans rally around momentum. Broadcasters prioritize consistency. Clark leaving punctures all three. Suddenly, the WNBA doesn't look like a rising force. It looks like a league struggling to keep hold of its most marketable stars.
Caitlin Clark will miss the remainder of the season. They handled this terribly. It is what it is. So the grift is over for 2025. So transparent. Yep, fans are already starting. You'll handle this injury very poorly. Shame on you for dragging us through this BS. Again, they drug. Can't blame fans. Can't blame them. Good.
Let's imagine the next season without her. Attendance numbers could nosedive. Television ratings may slip back to pre-Clark levels. Casual fans who tuned in out of curiosity might decide they don't care enough to stay. And if that happens, what incentive remains for corporations to pour money into sponsorships? The league could very well find itself back at square one, wondering how it lost everything it had in such a short time. But perhaps the most haunting possibility is that Clark's move will inspire others to follow. Once a precedent is set, it's nearly impossible to reverse. If Clark thrives in Europe, and given her skill, charisma, and fan base, she almost certainly will, what's to stop other stars from exploring the same path? Angel Reese has already shown she values her brand as much as her game. Aaliyah Boston has global appeal that could easily translate overseas. If one by one, the league's stars slip through its fingers, what remains? And yet, there is another side to this. For all the doom and gloom predictions, some argue that Clark's exit could be the very wake-up call the WNBA needs. Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what must change. If executives are truly serious about growth, now is the moment to prove it. Increase salaries, enforce stronger protections on the court, treat stars not as replaceable assets, but as the foundation upon which the league stands. If Clark's move sparks reform, perhaps her departure will ultimately save the WNBA, even if it nearly destroys it in the short term.
Still, one cannot ignore the symbolism of it all. For decades, female athletes have been asked to sacrifice time, money, health for the sake of the movement. They've been told their careers must serve as stepping stones for the next generation. Clark's choice rejects that narrative. She isn't sacrificing her prime years for the league's benefit, she's prioritizing herself. In doing so, she sends a powerful message. Women athletes deserve the same agency, respect, and financial security as their male counterparts. And that's where this story transcends sports. Clark isn't just challenging the WNBA, she's challenging an entire culture that undervalues women in athletics. Her exit is a protest, a statement, and an act of defiance. By choosing Europe, she forces a conversation that can no longer be ignored.
Meanwhile, overseas, basketball leagues are salivating. They understand what the WNBA lost. European basketball isn't just acquiring a superstar, they're acquiring a brand, a movement, a global icon. Clark's presence will sell tickets in Madrid, Istanbul, and Milan just as easily as it did in Chicago and New York. She brings with her a fan base that transcends borders, a wave of attention that could elevate European women's basketball into uncharted territory.
If that happens, the WNBA may find itself no longer the pinnacle of women's basketball, but a secondary option, a feeder league rather than the main stage. That possibility terrifies league executives. They know that once prestige shifts, it rarely shifts back. If Europe becomes the destination, if stars begin to prioritize it over America, the WNBA's very identity will crumble. It was supposed to be the premier league, the dream of every young athlete. Now, it risks becoming the fallback, the option players tolerate when better offers aren't available.
So where does that leave Caitlin Clark herself? In a position of unprecedented power. She now controls her narrative in ways no female basketball player ever has. She is both a pioneer and a rebel, the hero and, to some, the villain. But regardless of the label, she has cemented herself as the most influential women's basketball player of her generation, not just for what she did on the court, but for the statements she made off of it. Her journey overseas will be watched with microscopic attention. Every game will be dissected, every stat compared, every crowd reaction analyzed. If she dominates, and she almost certainly will, it will validate her decision in the eyes of millions. If she struggles, critics will pounce, declaring it proof she never should have left. But no matter what, she has forced the world to care. That in itself is a victory.
For the WNBA, the path forward is uncertain. It can deny, it can spin, it can attempt to downplay the loss, but it cannot escape the reality. Its greatest star walked away at the height of her powers. That will forever remain a stain on its history. The only question now is whether the league learns from this moment or allows it to mark the beginning of its decline. As fans, we are left with a mix of emotions: shock, anger, sadness, perhaps even admiration. Some will mourn the loss of watching her nightly highlights on American television. Others will admire her courage to walk away from a system that failed her. But no matter where you stand, you cannot deny the significance of this decision. Caitlin Clark's exit is not just a sports story, it is a cultural story. A story about power, respect, and the right to control one's own destiny.